Hey guys, this is Callum, Joe, and Ray. We're just coming up with you some kind of hot takes from like the recent news. So just kind of getting into things. The ban list is going to be after Worlds now, which is Worlds is 29th to the 31st of August. So it's going to be the next event after that, which I can't remember what time that is.
So it should be something around early September for a South American YCS, and then there's a late September and early October one for EU and NA respectively. If trends follow, we're probably getting a list around YCS Anaheim, which is early October.
Cool. So we've got a list coming up. It's going to be several months, put it that way. So yeah, does this suck? It kind of feels sucky, kind of doesn't. What are your takes?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually quite good in the sense that like you've allowed players to know, right? Like I appreciate the comms, let them like communicating to us saying we don't want to produce a ban list right now, but we will let you know that we're not producing one. So all the EU WCQ players know, and they're like, oh, cool, right, I can just prep for this event. I don't have to be worried about ban list dropping and then ruining all my prep. I think that's quite nice from like a feedback player quality of life thing, but
not to also be a Konami shill, because we're never really trying out. Yu-Gi-Oh players are always quite critical, but it has also gave us a little bit of a shake-up of what's been expected for the past 3 to 6 months. Everyone knows Justice Hunters coming out is like the most meta impactful set of 2025. It's the big news that everyone's waiting for. It's the big set that everyone's buying into. We've seen pre-release prices even reflect that of how cheap they are because distributors are buying in so much bulk, which is fantastic for the player base. But we already had one shake-up of the TCG getting duelist advance ahead of Justice Hunters, which shook up the NAWCQ and the EUWCQ accordingly. But this way we're going to have a different ban list to work to than the OCG. The OCG saw a lot of their currently strong decks fall out of favor because of the ban list. I believe Ryziel is completely off the radar over there. Malice has became a lot less represented, as well as sort of an array of other decks that just got phased out. But we went into this format, a lot of people went in expecting Malice to not be a playable deck, but now we have Malice, Ryziel, and the TCG exclusive archetype with Mitsurugi being relevant. So Justice Hunters as a whole seems like it's actually a bit of a shake-up for TCG players, which is quite good because it means we're not going into a solved format already.
In my opinion, though, it does kind of suck for, say, if you're going to like an event coming up, like I don't know how many regionals or any events and stuff like that, but after Euros, at like some of those big, like the YCS has been talking about before the ban has hit, it does kind of feel kind of sucky, the fact that you're maybe going to have to like prep for so many different decks with the side, and like there's going to be cards like which you're really not too sure whether it's going to be worth putting in or not, because playtesting groups are going to be very hit or miss. As we can see from differences between Europe and America, there's so many different people play different decks. So it just, like, as in people love plants over here, and obviously in America, plant was just non-existent. Is it going to be the same over here? Like, could they see some data from us showing how people absolutely love one specific deck, but then don't love it over in America? And it would just be interesting, like, for me personally, it would suck trying to side and all these kind of things you have to bear in mind, and so many decks you have to learn and think that you could face in a Swiss and even into a top cut. It just feels kind of painful personally.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point you raised, that there will just be so many decks. I think one interesting thing that I have thought about is how Malice will fare in this. Like, will Lancia, because there's so many different decks in the format, will Lancia get pushed out of sideboards? And then it does the whole Lancia is pushed out of the sideboards, Malice gets really, really good, then everyone puts Lancia back in, then Malice falls off. I'm just curious if that cycle will actually end up happening. I do think, though, it'll be interesting to see if whenever Justice Hunters all drops and all those sets happen after Euros, right, how those decks will actually fare into each other. Whether how much of an effect will Mitsurugi actually have into the different Justice Hunters decks, right? For example, K9 Vanquish Soul is able to commit a number of different monsters on your turn, start playing on your own turn, but Mitsurugi has like a nice clean out to that. Like, they're able to blow up the whole field or whatever, so then you're now committing cards into the field that then they can blow up. It's interesting in terms of that.
Yep, I'll follow up on that because I've tried playing some of the current format decks into the Justice Hunters post decks, and it does seem like a big shake-up because I think Yummy was much better placed in the OCG format because of the interaction. So Vanquish Soul cards interacting on turn 0 didn't matter because Yummy 1 cards are quite strong, especially like Tupsy starts. So you could play a fair amount of breakers in that deck. Whereas now, because Mitsurugi and Malice still exist in the format, breakers are notoriously terrible into those. They really struggled in the current TCG format to find a place. A lot of people just cited things like a thrust package for the Charmies and cards like that because they knew any of the sort of other generic breakers, droplets, even imperms, or some more of like the new Dominus cards, like Songs of the Dominators, just didn't have a place.
The one thing that, like, as a player, I like seeing ban lists relatively often. Like, I love the days when we saw ban lists like every 3 months, just because just seeing some of those cards get checked. Like, there's so many cards. Everybody hates floodgates, right? I wouldn't hate, like, if they could leave the decks alone, right, and hit the floodgates, I would be happy with that, because there's so many cards at the moment which are just make a format feel like there's just no skill in certain cards. Like Protoss, obviously there's a certain level of skill being able to get that card out and playing for all the interactions and stuff, but once you summon and activate Protoss, it just kind of feels a bit sucky. Say stuff like just drawing, Mistaken Arrest, or like cards like that, you don't even get to play the game, which kind of feels a bit rubbish. So like seeing cards like this get put out, or a lot of the ones that are 1, which just feels so, if you draw it by chance and you just win the game, it just sucks. Like Tikaboo, Gozen, Rivalry, all of these kind of cards. It would just be nice to see them get checked, let alone the other decks. I think those are the things that like a lot of people probably want to see. The cards that are just rough to play into, that you don't want to see. Those are the ones you really want to see go out, to be honest. Also, seeing these other decks stay alive for longer and giving me more creative choices, that doesn't suck. That kind of feels nice.
We're in an interesting spot, I think, in the TCG, especially because we don't have Ryziel hits. So, I think everyone appreciates that floodgates aren't fun cards unless you're the one Stun Andy at locals and you really enjoy the new Morganite cards that got printed. Most people don't enjoy them, but they do become a lot more prevalent in the Justice Hunter decks. So off the top of my head, Vanquish Soul obviously notoriously played. There can be only 1 to amazing success, and K9 hasn't really stopped that being a thing. Yummy can also play Gozen Match and Rivalry. I think some people are also trying to play Anti-Spell in that deck. Those cards were good because X Ryziel didn't exist in the OCG format anymore, because that deck got phased out. As we still have 2 copies of it, a third if we're counting Bonfire, and then we also have 7 practicing on that can help search it. So those generic floodgates become a bit worse. Additionally, Protoss as a card in general, when we were sort of speaking about the idea of talking about what cards might get hit post-Worlds and what have been problem cards in the TCG, Protoss actually might be something that gets naturally checked by the Justice Hunter decks. Because we're going into a format where K9 Izuna becomes a generic hand trap package, 3 of her with 1 K9 Lupus, which allows you to perform a quick XYZ summon on any turn if your opponent's activated a card from hand or grave. The most notorious deck for Protoss locking was Ryziel variants, and thankfully that deck plays into Izuna. Habakiri hand effect, or any of the Mitsurugi names or Night Sword Serpent in graveyard trigger Izuna. You can wait until your opponent commits an Infernal Flame Banshee to the board, tries to add flag, and then you can summon the Ripper and then negate the flag because it's an activated effect. Problems come here if they set up the Ryziel engine. Cards like Cross are still legal and active. That's not something you can ever do anything about, and if they get that full setup, I think most players accept they probably lost that game in a lot of situations, but it's something where I could see Konami are okay with it, and maybe this is why they're waiting till post-Worlds, because there might be a bit of a natural phase-out off some of these problematic cards.
I think one of the other reasons why they're probably waiting is Konami has sort of tended to do this a bit more often, specifically in the TCG. You look back at some previous formats where players were clamoring for a list, and then it turned out that a set came out, and then it changed all the metagame, right? Which meant that if they had made a list at that time, it would have been unsatisfying a week after when the set dropped. So it's probably actually quite good and quite responsible for them actually just to wait, because if you jump in ahead of time, you'll call things wrong, and they probably haven't done enough internal testing to actually decide these are all the problems that need to get hit. So it's sort of a frustrating thing of The players have to work it out. Hopefully the format improves, and then that'll hopefully be a good solution to that.
How that sort of translates also interesting in TCG, where deck creation is a bit more diverse. I'll call back to sort of last October, September time in Snake Eyes format, post in Infinite Forbidden and Rage of the Abyss release, where a Trade and Trade guys had created the Kashtira Fiendsmith deck, which just didn't exist sort of previously in formats. So Konami letting these decks play out and sort of trying to understand where a format actually ends up might lead to a bit more player satisfaction.
Thank you for listening, guys. Don't forget to put your thoughts and ideas down in the comments below. We're interested to hear your takes. See you in the next one.